morning, everyone. Welcome to Talking Horses. Sarah Obadwi and Andy Serling. It is his New York Bred Showcase Day, the original New York Bred Showcase. This is the one. This is the first one we had. I think it started in 1994. And you know, I was thinking today that obviously we're having them at Aqueduct as we're redoing Belmont Park, but we've actually had this one at Aqueduct before. I believe in 1996. It might have been 5, but I think it was 6. I think it was 6. We canceled. It was like really awful. I think it was a wind. I don't know if it was as much rainy, but as much as it was very, very windy that day. And we ended up canceling. I remember driving out with Harvey back. I used to drive out a lot with Harvey back then. And coming out, and they canceled. And we had to move it since it was closing weekend at Belmont. We had to move it here.
The following week.
So it has been here before. But this will be
30.
The second to last one. This will be 31, actually,
31.
right? Assuming we've run them all. Yes, but anyway, it's always a fun day of racing, good stakes, and all the friends getting together.
Yes, absolutely.
This day, so we've got a lot to talk about. So we'll head over to Naira Bets. Use the promo code CUP25. Got probably less than a week to do that one. Get that extra $25 bet for the Breeders' Cup weekend, which of course is now just 5 days a week, starting Friday. And we'll match for $200 of your initial deposit. Check out Track Stats while you're over at Naira Bets as well. We also have a 20% Supervecta bonus. It's a Sunday bonus, 20% Supervectas. Opt in over at Naira Bets for that. And we are on FS1 today from 12:30 to 5:30, covering all of the action. And it's just, I mean, it happened in today's, not the last, it's a later, I don't know. Or maybe it was yesterday or whatever.
They all feel the same at this
strength,
point.
well, where the strength of these 2-year-old maiden turf races ends up on the AE list.
Yep.
Right? Was it yesterday's last? No,
it wasn't yesterday, but I think it was at one point last week.
It just feels like it happens a lot.
frequently.
It happens a lot where they end up, and if you look at this race, there really is sort of nothing to go on in the body of the race per se.
I agree.
And obvious horses in more therapy and blame it on the stones than in the AEs. So you end up in the first race, and the picks will come up eventually. Eddie's probably sleeping back there. He needs a little rest.
It's been a long
where
weekend.
You're just doing a whole heck of a lot of guessing. And, you know, the problem I have with Army Proud, whose dam was one of my favorite horses, I mean, you're just assuming that she's gotten better, and maybe she has, but her debut was terrible. I mean, she had a perfect trip that day. And where did she have any run? And I want to pick her, but I give up.
I hear you. I'm not necessarily assuming that this horse is getting better. I'm looking at the rest of this field as pretty hungry in terms of the first-time starters are the ones making surface switches and the stats. There was not a ton to really hang your hat on.
I thought there was plenty of pedigrees, little pedigrees here and there in this race. You didn't think so?
Not really. I think that they're there if you really want to look for them, but there's maybe 3 or 4 horses I could have gone with instead, and ultimately I went for one with experience on the grass, so in a race that has at least been productive moving forwards, and I thought this horse had every shot to do some running in that race, but I think once this one did switch leads, this horse was just a little bit green, a little bit inexperienced, and Tyler Gaffleone, who was aboard, actually ends up looking over his shoulder towards the inside at one point because the horse is lugging in after the lead change, so maybe with a straighter path, this horse can do 2% more running.
Couldn't have worked out a better trip. I mean, I bet her or him, and I remember it well, thinking, oh, if he's got a horse, he can't lose from here, and he just had nothing. Listen, maybe you're right. Maybe the experience will get him home, but I'm going to say I disagree. I mean, the horse that you have second, the damn Vinda, is probably a little before your time, but she wasn't a bad turf sprinter for George Weaver.
Yeah, he's had plenty of success. This is a Weaver family all over. I mean, he's had Vacoma, who's off to a hot start as a new stallion. He's trained plenty of the half-siblings for this one that can run on turf a little bit.
This one was the theoretical weaker half, and the other one won the race. The other, Weaver won, but actually ran very well. I found pedigrees to go on, and I'll just go through some. I mean, there's a little bit with Ragtime Prankster down the rail as a half to a turf winner. That's not a terrible horse.
Bertrill?
Is it?
The two-time turf route winner at huge prices,
Hey, Bertrill, Greg Will's favorite horse.
Yeah.
The 6 Mo Creasa
is
actually a really interesting long shot horse and didn't even run that badly off the turf. And this horse is after tons of horses that are turf runners, Creasa and the whole Creasa family.
Yeah, none of them won it too. And that bothers me a little bit. It seems like they're horses that take a little more time to develop. But in this field, when you have all of your half siblings being winners on the grass, it's not a bad thing.
The pedigree that jumped off the page at me is the 7 Yobro. It's a half to 4 turf winners out of 5 to try it. They were solid runners. An Omaha Beach is a wharf front. I thought this horse was way the pedigree horse that you wanted it here. Now, whether it's going to win first time out, I don't know. What about Not for Hire? This horse is not really turf, except Not This Time is always effective as a turf sire. So I threw that horse in as well.
Yeah, I think we've covered all the horses that I could make a small pedigree case for, except for the one who I thought that was more turf route meant. But
well, I think that's a very dangerous territory to go on, because a lot of times 2-year-olds will win first time out going shorter, even though they have more their pedigree says longer. I mean, the history is laden with dirt routers and even turf routers that were effective going long and short in their debuts because they're getting started somewhere. There's a difference, I think, between older established horses sprinting and routing, and a pedigree is a pedigree in my opinion, and these horses have enough.
I think on principle, I don't disagree with you. I just don't know that it matters in my handicapping in this spot.
We'll see what happens in race number 1. Race number 2. Well, there's a whole lot of horses in here that have had different kinds of trips and different kind of things happen. And we'll start out with Patronage and New York Scrappy. I thought New York Scrappy, this was last time out, ran a better race 2 back, but didn't really run that badly in this race, to be honest with you. And I actually thought he ran well here with a wide trip. And of course, Patronage, who, broke a little slow, but was on the rail the whole way, angled out and made that big close. I guess either one of these horses could win. I feel like, Sarah, this is a race where just about all of them can win here. And they did run behind a Klarovich horse, Amplitude, that got bet and ran like it.
Good trip or not, I mean, he burst through that pack and really pulled away from the rest of that field. And I think that, yes, there was some pace in that race. And yes, it started to come apart towards the later stages. So the closers were able to make that run. But I don't think that the 2 horses that we're talking about coming out of that race ran badly at all, nor did the winner. I think that we've just seen a couple of opportunities from a lot of these different horses. And with New York Scrappy, I thought that he didn't break quite as well in that last start. And that actually might have helped him a little bit, because he ended up being able to be more with the flow of the race instead of being towards the inside and being a little bit keen and wanting to go on like he was in that start prior to that.
Well, I don't know. I thought he got kind of wide in there as well. And I don't know what. I didn't think the trip was particularly good. Patronage saved more ground in there. I'm not huge fans of either one of them because they've had their chances. And we'll take a look at Daybreak Delights. And here's my question for you. I sort of had him 4th and 5th with no particular order. I mean, Charles J gets completely blocked in the late running and probably would have won this race. But he probably would have won getting a very good trip in a race that was falling apart. I'm kind of running out of patience with Daybreak Delights.
I hear you. With Daybreak Delights in this race, I think that he is just part of a race that completely held together without a lot of moving parts from the back other than Charles J. And I think more than having that stop to his momentum, what I thought was more impressive with Charles J is that he's the only one that made up any ground in that race that was completely dominated forwards.
I agree.
So I like that about him more than a moment where he did have to steady and then re-rally, because I don't think his momentum was super inhibited, though he may be bet on that more so than closing into a race that held together.
Well, he also saved ground the whole way, and he was sort of running as the race was ending, and maybe he would have won if he got through. So why is Daybreak Delights going to do it today in a race that feels like it has more speed?
I think that he was part of a pace that fell apart last out, but he was the only speed that was left as far as the other horses that were forwardly placed in that race. He was able to put the other speeds away in there, and I'm hoping with the inside draw that he can sort of work out a similar trip to that, because at least he's shown that he can fight a little bit, have the forward position, and still outlast some of the other forward horses. So if I wanted anybody with some speed, that was the one that I trusted to sort of see things out a little bit more, and then backed things up with the horse that I think will be closing with Patronage.
Listen, he can win. There's so many horses in this race that can win this race. I don't fully agree with that. But, I mean, did he really run better than Vitalize, who was wide, who was first time on the turf, coming off a long layoff?
He was
did
closer
he really?
at the wire.
Well, yeah, but that was a horse that's coming off a long layoff that only finished a couple of lengths behind him that had a wider trip in there. So I don't, I'm not saying he can't win. Mm-hmm. I'm saying if I like the 2, I'd probably be more inclined to bet the 3. Now, listen, I could put a blanket over this. I think the 2 can win, the 3 can win, the 4 can win. The 5's a bit of a stretch, but you never really know with Linda. The 6 can win, the 7 can win, the 8 can win. Mm-hmm. Why to go with a 9? I don't know. I'm just sick of all these horses, and he's a big price.
He's doing something
and he's
new.
got plenty of pedigree. He's a half to 3 turf winners out of 6 to try it. You know, Bull Toro's had success with turf routers in his races. He gets a trainer switch to Jeremiah Englehart. I think there's a lot of things to just be a little bit interested with this horse getting the turf, and he's going to be a price. And I guess in some ways, maybe it just made my life easier picking him, because otherwise I felt like I was mixing a big bowl and I was reaching in and just grabbing one, because I'm not saying your points aren't relevant. They are, but there's so many cases to be made for so many of these horses that all run buyers right around 70.
Exactly.
And there's nobody you can point at and say, this is the horse to beat. You know, he's better than these.
The separators aren't much.
Yeah.
So I totally get wanting to go with somebody else.
Yeah, it's just, and I don't love him, but I just think it's a reasonable race to take a shot against. Otherwise, I feel like, you know, one of the stupidest but correct statements is, you know, trip is key. But in reality, the horse that wins this race will probably be the one that got a little bit the luckiest. So we'll see what happens. And it does have a feeling, and maybe I'm wrong, unless somebody weird wins like my horse, where you're going to have 5 horses within a length and a half of each other.
I think I'd be a little surprised by the 1, but that might be it.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter with that. I'm just
Sure.
saying this is a race where there just isn't a great separator, at least to me.
I agree.
Race number 3, we'll take a look at Sacrosanct, who's going to be a heavy favorite, beating Pay the Juice. I'm not betting a horse that improved its buyer figure 21 points, running on a big inside speed track, but obviously he can win.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think that he was impressive first time out. I think that he ran well in this race, but I think that the number that he had in this race and that big gap in improvement, as well as the margin of victory, that's something that is really enhanced by the racetrack and how the racetrack was playing that day. And he's going to be bet off of what looks like an absolutely blowout performance that makes
It
him
was
look
a
so
blowout performance.
but enhanced by circumstance,
as I
which
said,
we
I
know.
agree.
So I think that that's why you're dealing with a horse that I believe is a good horse. I believe is talented, but I don't necessarily think that he's going to come back with another 85 buyer.
Yeah, we'll take a look at Moplex and Soon to Be King hitting the wire to get on the funny side. I took Moplex. I thought he actually ran well in the Champagne. I think he kind of solidified himself as at least solid. He's not a killer, but he's pretty good. And he had every reason to lose this race. And much as I wanted Soon to Be King to win, Moplex was best this day. But I did put Soon to Be King second. I have a little bit of a thing for him.
I like him a little bit. I thought that this horse ran well. I think that he just got passed by the horse who might just be a touch better than him. But
Well, he got a better trip than Moplex did in that race. I mean, Soon to Be King got a great trip there.
he did, yeah. And I think that
Supposed to win.
overall Moplex is just a better horse.
Yeah.
But I think Moplex handled the stretch out and distance well in that Champagne, like you mentioned. He's not exactly going to be heading off to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile with Chancellor McPatrick and whoever else may be joining him there. But I thought that he ran respectably well against that open company, as he has in the past, and you at least know that he can go the distance and run well enough.
I prefer him over Sacrosanct, as do you. As we go to race 4, the biggest favorite I imagine on this card will be With the Angels, and we'll take a look at With the Angels, who frankly is another horse, though, that is dressed up by running on the gold rail on the 22nd. Having said that, you know, it doesn't really matter that much to me. He's actually off the rail a little bit, but I think he's with the flow of the track. His first race was so good, or her first race was so good, and who do you really think is going to beat her unless she just fails to show up today?
Exactly. That's sort of my line of thinking as well. Yes, I agree with you that she was helped by the racetrack in this performance. I know that that first race, though, still is just faster than what we've seen from anybody else. And so even without that last performance, she would still be a horse that I have a hard time making a case against, because she's beaten some of the other logical contenders in this spot.
all
There's
obvious.
no
Yeah.
super new face.
Yeah, the new face is this one, Boston's Finest, who we both have second, but she might have a little upside, and, you know, I guess Carmen's Grandy Jar could be second, as could Valtellina, both hoping she improves a little bit. Got a pretty good trip in this race to get it done, but I don't know what's going to have to happen. I mean, the only way the favorite loses this race is if she doesn't run her race. If she runs close to a race, this is a horse that can't make up the gap, but maybe she has a chance to be second.
Yeah, I mean, this horse has to get quite a bit faster to be competitive with the first race that With the Angels ran. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I thought that this was a professional effort from her, but everybody else is really just running for second if With the Angels shows up.
Could not agree more. We'll break after 5 as we take a look at the Empire Distaff. And obviously the question in this race is how you feel about the distance. And we'll take a look at Sterling Silver winning the Johnstone Mile against Smokin' Hot Kitty. And I look back and I know she doesn't, her only, I think her 2-turn race was against Nest in the Ashland. And frankly, she ran a figure in that race comparable to what she'd been running at the time in 1-turn shorter races. She does have a very good second in a mile and a 16th at Belmont Park, albeit around 1 turn. I just think that she's so much better than these horses. I am not going to try to beat her. I think she's a superior horse.
I like her a lot. I have a lot of respect for her. I don't think she necessarily.
She must be happy. Does she know that?
I'm going to tell her outside
that's
if I see
good.
her.
Yeah.
No, I'll be on the
Probably
desk so
help
she
her
won't
win.
hear from me. But I don't think that she really wants a mile and an eighth.
Based on what?
Based on that one race where she was routing out in the Ashland, she ran a 64 buyer, which
Was it compared to her figures that she had run around it on the dirt?
she ran a 77 in the next start. She had run a 77 2 starts prior to that. She did run a 57 going the mile in the Busher prior to that. But now
she has a mile and a 16th race at Belmont Park where she ran a big figure, I think around a 90-something, or at least in the 80s when she finished second to Class C, whatever.
Oh, you're right. Yes, 93.
Yeah,
That's
so
true.
she
so
has
she did
run
handle it at one
fine
time.
going long. So I don't know that the distance question, and I mean the fact that she ran the Ashland against Nest,
I don't think it's a fair
different
assessment.
time in her career.
Sure.
So I don't know that there's a great deal of evidence that she wants to go to mile and eighth, but I don't think there's evidence against it. I mean, you look at that race, the Johnstone Mile, where she was running out. Was she really not going to win that race if it was a mile and an eighth? I mean, that's a little bit hard to imagine. Now, I'm not saying she has to win today, but I'm not sure that the argument on distance is a little bit felonious.
I don't think that she's a horse that I want to take at a short price, going a distance
Okay.
that I don't think is preferable for her when she's also pace compromised, and there are horses that are going to be ahead of her.
Well, you say she's pace compromised. Take a look at her Johnstone Mile. She's had a length and a half off. I mean, there's an
Well,
argument
look
that
who else is in here.
the same horses.
Smokin' Hot Kitty's going to go.
She-
Bonadieu is not that slow early.
Then she's going to get a faster pace, and you think that's bad for her?
I'm
You
not
think
saying
a faster pace is bad for her?
I'm not saying that she's going to be a horse that is going to get a fast pace in this race. I'm saying they're going to be horses that are faster early than she is, and she's likely to not be forward.
But once again, I'm pointing out in the Johnstone Mile that when they went 24 and 47-2, she was right off the pace. So I'm not quite agreeing with that because I think evidence suggests that's not true. And I think that either way, I don't know how listen, maybe she doesn't finish mile and eighth and she's the big favorite in here, and I have no problem with the idea of trying to beat her. But if the pace is slower, she's going to be closer. If they go faster, they'll go too fast, and she'll be sitting a little farther up. Her position in this race is going to be a function of how quickly they're going up front, right? And either way, I think based on the Johnstone Mile, it doesn't seem to negatively affect her.
Do you feel like there was any sort of track bias that day in the Johnstone Mile?
I didn't look it up. I really didn't care.
I feel like she got over to the rail and saved a lot of ground. And
She
that
got
may
a
have
good
helped
trip
her.
that day, I agree. She
Yeah.
won eased up by 10 lengths. I mean, it's fine to play against her, but I think you're coming up with reasons that may or may not have a lot of, they're not actually accurate. She
Well,
has
whether
run,
they matter or not.
well, she has proven that she can handle distance. We need to move on. Who did you have on top here?
I ended up going with Venti Valentine,
We'll show her
who's
her race to Delaware last time.
inconsistent and hard to trust. And I think that she is one that has some races that absolutely win here and has some races that do absolutely nothing for me here. But I think that she's one that they tried a couple of different experiments with over the summer, and at least she ran well in that last start at Delaware. Saddle Up Jessie might not be in the same form that she was around the winter time last year, but she's still a solid horse, and I thought that she ran
God,
respectably.
she lost her form badly, didn't she?
Yeah.
I was shocked looking at that. I know
Yeah.
she had been so good last winter.
The numbers do not suggest that she's necessarily competitive.
Yeah, maybe she had an
right
off
now.
day. Maybe
but
she had
at
an
the
off
same
day.
time, I know that she likes this racetrack, and I feel more confident in her ability to get the distance.
You know, see, I don't. I'll be honest with you. I know she's got that big win, the critical eye. Wasn't there a huge heavy favorite in that race that got absolutely nothing?
I don't know.
There was somebody. Maybe you can pull up the chart. There was an odds-on horse in there, and it just felt like once that horse didn't run, this horse didn't show up, and it was a supersonic
Oh,
pace.
Fingal's Cave.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Fingal's
yeah,
Cave
yeah.
was in there and
But I mean,
didn't.
she was a second choice.
I know, but she was a
Yeah.
big favorite, Fingal, and
Yeah,
she didn't
yeah.
show up.
No, you're right.
She didn't even show up. It's
Yeah.
not like she ran
I
second.
hear you.
And, it's like they went 46-4, and it's just like somebody had to win the race.
Somebody
And
had to.
I like her too, and I've got her second, and I agree with you that she's dangerous in there, but I'm not convinced that I think she has kind of proven to be a better one-turn mile horse, but I agree. She's a better horse because
Because who else is there?
I don't know. I don't know where David's going with Amanda's Folly. A horse
wish
to
him
me
luck.
has proven way too frequently to be too slow.
Yeah.
And Smoking Hot Kitty, I love her and she can be the speed here. But I mean, how am I supposed to assume that she's not going to lose the favorite when the favorite just clubbed her? I mean, she didn't beat her by a length. She just destroyed her. And then Smoking Hot Kitty got back on track. And it's kind of like the one mediocre race she ran is a glaring defeat to the favorite.
And I have a lot of respect for Smoking Hot Kitty with the steps up in class that she's taken and really being able to show
great.
up over and over and over again. But I couldn't put her on top.
Well, it's not so much that. It's going longer and using her speed that has turned her career down, and that should be a lesson to people that like to rate
is
speed
important.
horses. That speed is actually good. It used to define racing. Nowadays, not so much.
Yeah.
We'll be back with the late pick 5 and the Iroquois after a quick break.
For almost 150 years, the Saratoga name has been synonymous with the finest quality, sustainably sourced spring water available anywhere. Saratoga carries on the rich tradition of its forefathers by crafting each stunning blue glass bottle with the same attention to detail and care that has been its hallmark for generations. Visit SaratogaSpringwater.com today or ask for us by name at your local market or restaurant. Saratoga Spring Water. Make every day exquisite.
We're back. So, the Iroquois. I'm going to tell you who's not going to be 6-1. The horse you have on top and I have second. I was going to pick her, and then I
saw
couldn't
that the rest
find
of the
a
world did?
single handicapper that doesn't like Kara's time. So I can promise you that she is not going to be the 6-1. And I originally was going to like her, and everywhere I turned, everybody liked her. And I thought, I'm not picking a horse that's like a wise guy horse that everybody's
not that
jumping
wise.
on. But she does get a good rider change, and maybe they wanted to get a rider that would get back to being a little more aggressive with her.
Because
I mean,
hasn't that been when she's been best?
what happened that was it Eric that decided or Mitch that decided or I don't know, because the horse runs 2 huge figures right on top of the pace and then they start rating her. I mean,
This
it's
is working really well.
insane.
Let's do something
right.
different.
It's
Right.
so insane.
Yep.
And now she does a perfect. I get all the reasons to like her, but everybody
she's-
liked her, so I didn't
She's
pick
very
her.
obvious. I hope that
I
she
don't think
gets
she's
some.
obvious. She's wise guy obvious.
I don't know if she's that wise if everyone's figured it out, but she has the races when she's more forward. She's getting a rider that's been very aggressive lately. She has the outside draw, has the outside speed. I mean,
I wouldn't say he's been very aggressive. He's been more aggressive when he's needed to be. But I agree. She's got a lot
he's
going.
riding
for her.
extremely well.
I'll
and
put it
look,
this way: he's riding better than the guy who was riding her before. Well,
at the time, yes, I agree.
has Eric ever ridden as well as Dylan?
At this current time,
No, ever, at any point in his career or their respective careers.
at any point compared to how Dylan's riding now, or just
Dylan.
between the
Dylan's
two
been a
of
better rider than Eric his entire career.
Okay.
I mean, he's riding better as a rider now in the last year or so, but he's always been a better rider. It just is. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to beat up on one guy, but Dylan's had a lot more success than him.
Yeah.
And Eric's had a very, very good agent up until recently as well. I mean,
can't bash
isn't the
Eric too
rider
much.
switch
He
a
did
big?
well.
Isn't the rider
Yes,
switch
it's
a big
reason.
factor in
Yes,
liking
and
this
it's not.
horse?
It's not necessarily someone's better than someone else because I don't want to get into that discussion because it's not worth
We're
anyone's.
not allowed to
It's
be
just not worth
critical.
anyone's
Can
time.
you imagine if sports writers weren't critical of baseball players and basketball players? More players would maybe come to the Yankees because they wouldn't
Everyone's
be
allowed
afraid
to
of
be
getting
critical.
beaten
It's
up.
kind of the entirety of having these conversations.
Right. It's the idea that it's okay to say that Dylan Davis is a better rider than Eric Cancel. I don't think there's anybody out there that disagrees with that.
Okay. I
Do
like.
besides Eric, maybe his immediate family?
I feel like it's not my place to say. Have I watched every single one of their races? Am I comparing them at the same time? Am I looking at?
So we can only assess horses
Oh,
because
boy.
they don't cry in their stalls, but not jockeys? Okay, I
just
disagree.
don't feel the need
We'll
to
agree
get
to
bothered
disagree.
with that.
Well,
But anyway, Dylan has a different tactic. Dylan is a different type of rider than Eric is. Dylan is going to go with this horse in more likelihood than Eric would. And we've seen that in the past. We've seen the evidence of that when Dylan was riding this horse previously, when this horse was forwardly placed. She
He
had
was
those
formerly
two
placed
races.
with Eric, and then suddenly he decided to start rating her. Or maybe Mitch told him to rate. I don't know.
I hope that she's forward today.
I agree with you. I agree. She was against the track last time out. I think there's plenty of reasons to like her. I just decided not to take her because everybody else did.
Hey,
and if she's 6 to 1, I'll be
that's what I
betting
did
her.
with Aunt Yoli
But
yesterday
I
because
got
I
a
originally
feeling
had her on top.
I got
so
a
hear
feeling
you.
she's going to be around 7 to 2, and maybe that's not a bad price. We'll look at Tricky Temper and Lilu. And listen, at the end of the day, if the good Tricky Temper that was running in these races shows up, she's going to win.
Yeah, I thought she
she's-
ran very well in this race.
She ran terrific. This was a huge effort. The question is, did she sort of get things going well at Saratoga? But now, Jeremiah's given her 2 months off, and I'm not going to hold her prioress against her. That was just taking a final shot on a horse that was going really well, and I can't blame, a lot of people thought he was crazy to come back in 2 weeks in this race, and she ran the best race she's ever run.
Yep, I hear you.
My feeling was Lilu is the old standby, and I kind of wonder if she's going to get a little lost and be higher than the 2 to 1. That maybe people will look at her last race where I thought Jose dumped her on a bad rail, and I'm not going to hold that race against her at all. And some might look and say, oh, she likes a wet track. Look how badly she ran
Her last race
time.
at Churchill or her last race?
His last race at Churchill on a sloppy
yeah,
track. He
yep.
put her on a bad rail, and I don't think you wanted to be on the rail that day. And so, obviously she's not going to be Tricky Temper if she runs her good race. But other than that, she is a horse that was 4 to 5 against her, and she's going to be a bigger price today. So that's why I took her.
Okay, that's a fair enough argument. I think a lot of horses could win this race, and I think kind of the fuzziest security code, because if this was a 7 furlong race, I would have tried to make the case to put her on top because she has those good races, and I think that she was a little bit against the racetrack a couple of times.
Isn't she not fast enough to win this race, though?
I think that given her 7 furlong races, she's been perfectly capable of winning against some of these horses with.
Okay, we'll agree to disagree.
Okay. I just don't think that she was
Lisa.
short.
Headband Lisa making an appearance. I guess Phil must be serving a suspension. It's nice to see Lisa's name in the PPs. You don't know Lisa, but if you've been
I
around the
don't, but-
racetrack as long as I have been, you've known Lisa for a long, long time. She's a terrific person, and I wish her luck. Race number 7. It's funny that she ends up training these because I had just said to Aaron Yagoda like 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, I said, geez, I haven't seen Lisa around in a while. He said, you're just not looking. She's around, and here she is. It's like
Here
those
she
horses
is.
that you haven't
You've willed her into
seen for a
existence.
year, and you bring their name up, and they end up in the PPs a week
Funny
later.
how that happens, where you'd be like, oh, I was just about
It's
to call
amazing.
someone that texts you. Yeah.
So
Crazy.
the Hudson, we're going to have 2 different opinions in this race. There are those, and maybe I don't know, what happened over there?
I don't know.
Confused by
There's
that.
something going on
That
over
must
there.
be in house. We'll take a look at the John Morrissey. I'm against Looms Boldly. He may win, but there were an unusual number of things that had to happen, like Rotney not getting out of the gate, like everybody rating their speeds that allowed him to cruise along on the front end. And I'm just not convinced that this horse, now maybe based his last race at Saratoga, he's turned his life around. If he has, he'll win. But I'm going to bet against it happening.
I hear you. He's tough to trust fully that he's now suddenly this new horse that he has been in his last 2 starts. I think he was a huge surprise, finishing a very game second to Subrogate in that race at Saratoga, and then we saw
Subrogate
horses
is-
not making up a ton of ground throughout that
Subragate's
weekend.
in the twilight, in the
Twilight
Bermuda Triangle somewhere since being last in the
Yeah,
Vanderbilt,
yeah.
right?
But
Yeah.
he ran well that day, I
No,
will
he did.
say, and then
And Puge's next race.
it was kind of something that I really doubted we were going to see a repeat of from Looms Boldly, and he proved me wrong in that race. And maybe it was circumstantial. Maybe it was so many different lucky
It was a
things
little
occurring.
circumstantial, I thought.
But at least he backed up the number to an extent that I thought that maybe there is that possibility that he is just a horse that is in great form right now. He's dealing with some horses in here that have not been using their speed as of late or have not been in the same form as of late. And I think that ultimately that just led me to going with the horse that I think is in the right form right now.
You may be right. I'm against him, but I'm certainly not going to be shocked when I turn out to be wrong. I would have picked Sheriff Bianco in here. but he never wins.
Right.
So I put him second, and I think Lightman has really improved. I thought he ran well in this race, given that there was really no pace. Then he got caught in that federal judge race chasing around, and finishing a length behind Accretive is not exactly terrible. And I feel like a horse that's going to quietly improve for Bruce Levine that I thought would be a square enough price that I could bet, and I'm kind of with him in the 2. What about Rodney? Neither one of us has this horse 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe we're wrong. I question his form. I know he had an excuse in that Morrissey, but I'm not going to take him off a sloppy track win at Finger Lakes, and obviously you agree.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen this from him in the past, really, where he's had this string of races where they've been so much slower than his usual races, back to back to back. In terms of what we've seen from him over his last 3 starts, those 3 races don't really get it done for me.
Well, his True North isn't terrible. I'm not sure.
It's not terrible, but it's still not a race that's necessarily going to compete with what we've seen as of late from some of these other horses.
Well, no, it's only a race not going to compete if Looms Boldly runs figures in the 90s. Otherwise, it's an 88. It's very similar. It's 3 points below the only, the best figure that Silver Satin, who we'll take a look at here, who both you and I have in the mix a little bit.
Is he quite good enough?
I don't know. I mean, based on what he's on the track, no. I mean, his 91 Beyer speed figure in this race says yes, but I don't think either one of us are ready to say that he's a 91 Beyer horse based on that race. And his last race is a strange race because he just got lost, but the race completely fell apart in his favor. I don't think he's quite good enough, but I think it's the right spot for TT to take a shot with him. That's what I would say.
Yep, I think it's fair to find out in here. And I wanted to try to make some sort of case for factually correct, but I don't think he's in great form right now either.
I don't like him either. I haven't seen a good race from him. But, the other thing I think about horses like Lightman, Silver Satin, a 3-year-old, Lightman, a 4-year-old, these are horses that might be up-and-comers.
Sure.
They might not be. They might just not be good enough to over.
There's always a chance.
The rest of them, for better or worse, are relatively established horses, and in some cases very good. See what happens. Interesting race, the Hudson, race number 8 on the turf. Well, this is going to be a fun one. There's something that Clement said to Richie about how he didn't like to give Joel instructions, but then he said Joel told him that he should give him instructions. Christophe, Joel, go to the lead. Now, he's not going to be in front of Moonage Daydream, but I don't know what, and as you know, I love Joel. Let's take a look at the beginning of the race.
More than
He's one of my
I've met.
favorite people around the track. He's a great guy. He really is. But really, Joel, what were you thinking here on this horse? He wins a race running off 2 back. He rates him in Saratoga, gets nothing. And then in here, I mean, he broke fine. He just couldn't drag her back a 9. It got really, really, really ridiculous. Right here, look at this.
She's so mad. She's like, what are you doing?
Right. So, okay. I don't know how good she really is, but
she's better than that.
I'd like to see her be given her head and allowed to run. Now, I don't think she's as fast as Moonage Daydream, but why can't the two of them sit 1-2 a little ahead of the field and let Silver Skillet find her rhythm at least, and then lose?
And you know who isn't always slow? What Love looks like either.
Well, no, she's not as fast as these horses. She just forwarded longer races.
I think with Moonage Daydream, she's been able to take advantage of some uncontested paces over her last couple of starts where nobody else wants to go.
She's the modern day, everyone
belongs to
daddy.
Yeah.
A horse with absolutely no speed that
inherits.
Lunatics decided was a speed horse because she once went the lead in 26 and 52, and everybody started taking back horses 10 lengths faster than her.
Yeah.
And
I could be the speed horse if no one wants to go either.
I don't want to completely knock, by the way, the one. She has just been very fortunate in 2 straight races.
Yeah, I mean, she still has to be there and show up, but she
has been good. I mean, to be fair, she's been good. You have Calla Loves Gold. We'll show her in the jockey, the final running of the races that should never have been run in the first place. 2 schools of thought with her, but go ahead.
I was surprised by this effort because
32 to 1. I think a lot of people were surprised.
Yeah, I think that I was not alone in that assessment. But I was actually really impressed with her 3rd place finish behind horses that I think are pretty decent. I think that this is a race that actually has some softer overall company than the one that she was facing last time. I thought that she was more forward than I anticipated in this race versus Beautiful Love, who made that big run from off the pace towards the outside as Makenga could not get the distance and the pace was coming apart in the later stages.
Yeah. I don't know. You know, listen, I've got her second, so obviously or third. I do see the logic. I'm not sure. You know, I'm somewhere two schools of thought. She kind of got third because it was that kind of race.
And
To
this
be
is also
fair,
shorter.
Beautiful Love came back and ran a very competitive third in the Weah the other day. So it's not like that race is necessarily now Justin I ran nowhere and no, they got Justin I back, right? The Sands Point. She got nothing.
Yep.
But she's a horse that wants more distance, so that's not a big deal. No,
I just wonder if she wants to now cut back from being forward in a race that was more of that marathon.
Are you at all worried that she's going to be the total wise guy horse, and because that race is not going to be the 5-1 that she is, she may end up being 3-1 or 7-2? I'm not
I think
convinced.
it's completely possible, but I think that there are enough horses in here that have more proven turf form overall that are going to likely be more forward than she is, and I think there's enough of.
Well, what does it matter if they're that forward? I mean,
Because I think with the slight cutback in distance, I mean, she was a closing sprinter on the dirt, and now she's not
no,
likely
right,
to
but
be
why
forward.
is that? I mean, do you
Because
need to be that forward in here to be successful? Do
I
we know
think
that's
that-
the case?
I think that in general on the turf here, you want to be forward because no one wants to go.
Well, that's a different story. The turf courses aren't playing unfairly.
I'm not saying that
They're
there's any
playing
sort
fairly.
of track bias. I'm
There
saying that
isn't.
there's a theme that we see frequently. So whenever I look at these turf routes, I do look for somebody that isn't going to be last early. I'll say that.
Okay, it's a longer discussion.
I don't know.
She could win. You know, I think the
I
three
don't know
can
what
win.
price she's going to be.
For me, I didn't want the one. And, you know, there's New Ginja who ran this, you know, wild race out of nowhere on a track with a little bit of give in it up in
Once.
Saratoga. And
Yeah.
she's never run anything close to it. She finds that race she can win, but
Yeah.
see what happens in the Ticonderoga, I think. Yes. The Mohawk. I ain't being clever in the Mohawk. We'll watch Dakota Gold beat Spirit of St. Louis. I'll tell you what Spirit of St. Louis gets in this race. He gets to stop having to give lots of weight to everybody. And I'm not a big weight guy, but at a mile and a 16th, I think 6 pounds is worth more than a nose. And I think that probably piling all the weight at some point, just giving the advantages to other might have, and it might have not helped. And I'll tell you something else. He didn't run this day, so Spirit of St. Louis. Now, maybe he's tailing off, though I thought he ran fine in the race at Keeneland against better horses. I'm not trying to beat this horse. I know he's a heavy favorite. I don't see any reason to bet against him, though.
I hear you. He's the likeliest winner. He makes a lot of sense. The record speaks for itself in these kinds of New York bred races, and I don't think that they did the wrong thing by necessarily taking a shot in that turf mile either. I don't think that was a disgraceful performance against much better company for him. And I'm not big on weight either, but I think that there's a time and place when it does ultimately end up making a slight difference. And when you have that slim of a margin, I think that argument has some weight to it, no pun intended.
We'll take a look at Edge of the Storm getting it done last time out, but I'm going to say something to you. You just gave us a lecture that you want horses that are not back in the back of the pack. You're picking a horse that's going to be towards the back of the pack here.
I am, because I think there's going to be speed in this race.
Well, don't you think with it's all coming together, coming out, that there's a little less pace?
I do, but I do think that Ruse is a horse that likes to be forward. I think that Jerry the Nipper does his best running when he's a forwardly placed type.
How fast do you really think they're going to be going?
I don't know. Fast
Jerry the
enough.
Nipper ain't exactly that fast these days,
No.
much as it disappoints me. He ran the weirdest race of all in here because he looked
did.
like he was going to back up and finish 6th
I would
and
love to
came back
make
on.
some sort of case for him, but it's just been a long time since we've seen a
The
really,
problem
really
with him
competitive effort from him.
is when he could have won these races, he got bad rides.
Yep.
And he really, now they're just
Now
caught
it's
up to
not
him a
the
little. But I have nothing but love for him and have him there. I think City Man's going to run better. I don't think he got to make a comfortable run in that race we just watched. I thought getting
Yeah,
down
I'm
to the
with you.
inside and a horse like him trying to rally inside of horses. Now, on the other hand, maybe he's a horse that sort of passed his time. I'm not sure what to do with Hush of the Storm. I get it. I don't know. Maybe he's just improved dramatically for Brad Cox. But
I think that could be the case.
I think the one's going to win this race. I just think he's going to prove that he's better than these once and for all in the Mohawk. But we'll see what happens
Wouldn't surprise
in
me.
the Mohawk. Yeah, he is a heavy favorite. Nothing clever about that. The Empire Classic. So Drake's Passage and Donegal Surges and the commentator. Why do you prefer Donegal Surges to Drake's Passage today?
Because Drake's Passage is coming off of a performance that I just can't take him at a very short price at coming back in. I know there are some valid excuses for that race in terms of it being rained off the turf, and he was always meant for the dirt, but it was a muddy sealed surface, and he just almost ran too bad to believe in there. And Phileas Fogg is a horse that maybe was helped by the racetrack, but did also come back and run okay.
On another track, favoring speed.
Right.
He's on
I
the
can't
list of
take
luckiest
him-
horses of the year.
I can't take him off that last performance.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you. You look at his what's his prior last bad race. It was a muddy sealed track, and people are going to say, and it's not unfair to say, well, the race we just watched, he galloped the muddy sealed track. He got to control the race on the front end, and it did work in his favor. The track was playing in his favor, and I don't disagree. A bit of a dressed up race, but he's got so many other figs that are similar. To say that it's just a complete outlier would be wrong. This is a horse that doesn't want to take dirt, and he was never comfortable. They got outrun at a pace that he could not be running. He can't compete with the kind of pace that he was chasing that time, and he's just not a kind of horse. And you could see right away he was not running in that race. It was fairly apparent around the first turn. So I do think he gets an excuse for that. I think he's the horse to beat, but I didn't pick him either. But go ahead on Donegal Surges.
I think this is the horse that's just in really solid form right now. I mean, he's the one that did come back with a good victory, and we saw Digital Ops come back and win yesterday, maybe helped by the racetrack, maybe not. I think that inside speed thing was really hard to tell.
Well, it wasn't an inside speed track. Too many horses closed outside.
Right, but I think there were some horses where they had the inside and maybe their performances seemed better than one would expect, but then some horses towards the outside were able to make runs.
Well, I would say, yeah, I think you could argue that there's a little bit of a lean to inside speed, but too many
not
horses
a
ran well.
significant
But
bias.
what I would say about Digital Ops is this is a horse that wants to be in front and he wants to control. And I think it's a very different story than being
Sure.
close to the pace. And I think the fact he got to do that, especially against the other horse taking mine in the race, is just just a joke.
Yeah, that
Black
field that
Rain.
he faced yesterday versus the field he was in two back. It's
Well,
a
it
different
was just a
story.
difference, right? Well, because the horse he had to beat is just not a good horse in
Right.
Black Rain.
Versus
He's
a
just
field
not
of
good.
some okay
And,
horses.
right, and
Yep.
and so I think getting able to control was different. Listen, I'm not in love with him, but I can see the argument for him. He certainly ran okay last time. He got a very good ride from Kendrick, and a good trip. But he may get another one again. I think the one's probably better, but I'm not against the idea. What about Bank Frenzy, the number 4? I'm third, and you have second. Take a look at
He's in
him.
good form.
Listen, Nelson, I think that the track was somewhat fair this day, but obviously Nelson Avenue ran a good
Very well.
second or third yesterday.
Yep.
He legitimized it. He was taking advantage of the half a bias yesterday, I guess.
The half
It
a
is
bias.
funny, though, but you're not wrong. I mean, a lot of
Because it
horses.
seemed like one way, and then
I-
other ways it was like, well, then I'm totally wrong about this horse, but that one, then I was, I don't know.
I wouldn't want to ignore that there were some seemingly exaggerated performances. I haven't seen buyer figures weren't posted when I looked early this morning.
Yeah. I don't know. He's in great form right now. He's been.
I'm not knocking
his
him.
last 3 races are all good efforts. I mean,
Is he better, though, in a 1.125 race when he can be really forward, and is there too much speed for him in here? I picked him third. I'm not against
yeah.
it. It's
I mean,
not a-
I think it all depends on what the horse that you ended up picking on top does in terms of his early position. No.
well, no, Mama's Gold's going to go.
Well, sure, but
Romero,
Drake's Passage might also want to be forward, and then it's what does Olympic Dreams do about that?
so Romero rated a horse for the first time in his life a little last time. He didn't run well last time. He was close up early, but he needs to just send him. And Romero's not one going to get in the way of a horse like that. I'm not taking Olympic Dreams because I think he's going to be forward in this race. I don't know. The 8's fast. The pace projector has him like 4th or 5th. I obviously like Flavian getting on him. I want to give this horse a chance. You start looking through his races. He's a horse that does not like a sloppy seal track. I know he's had some success, but he really overall has not run well, especially chasing. You go 2 back as a turf race. I don't care what happened. The Excelsior, really? A big inside speed track, and he was caught out in the middle of the racetrack. I'm going to hold that against him. And you get past those races where he legitimately has some viable excuses. Only 2 of them are on the dirt. You've got a horse that's running figures that make him super competitive here.
I
He
hear you.
picks up Flavian Pratt, and he can't be a short price in this race.
I hear you.
So that's why I took him.
I wonder if he runs better on Lasix.
That's a reasonable argument.
And that's sort
That's a
of
very
what,
that's a very reasonable
that's
argument.
what led me away from
He did
him.
run one big figure without it, but
Yeah.
overall, you're right. That's a very
But
fair
he also
argument.
hasn't had enough opportunities without it to really show me that he can't.
Well, let's look when he ran without it. Muddy sealed track, sloppy sealed
Yep.
track, and against the bias race in the Excelsior.
So I don't think
not
it's a clear picture.
I don't think
Yeah.
it's an invalid thing to bring up. I think it's always a fair thing to
I
bring
just don't
up.
think it's not. It doesn't have enough legs.
He has a
yet.
big figure. That was the day Greg Wolf bet him in the commentator
Yeah.
at 27 to 1. Greg ran second with him, and then he ran second at like 30 to 1 in the last race, and he
Poor
would have had
Greg.
both of them pick 5. Would have been a monster score.
Would you think we would have seen him again?
Yeah, Greg's a workhorse. Greg's the man. Let's look at General Banker in Jackson Heights. Listen, General Banker's in great form for Jimmy Ferraro. The 1.125 is obviously somewhat not uncharted territory, but in recent times, since he got good, is uncharted territory.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily trust that that makes him better. But if there's some pace in this race, you know that he comes with his run late. He's been in, I agree, really good form as of late. And I didn't pick him this day, but he ran extremely well. And
It's a great form.
Jackson Heights is one of the horses that had one of the luckiest bias-assisted trips in Saratoga coming up the rail. I thought he ran very well in this race to
I don't
close from
disagree.
that far back and make up the amount of ground that he did.
He's improved.
And I think that the odds discrepancy between the two of them, if you like General Banker, you should also take a look at Jackson Heights.
I disagree with that, but I hear what you're saying. I think he's...
Based on that last race.
Yeah, the problem is that General Banker is going to be a short price because he's got a plethora of
proven
races
form,
that are
yes.
at least fringing on being competitive here, whereas Jackson Heights really doesn't. And that's the big difference. So, you know, obviously a bigger price, but I think he's got to prove it. All right, Sarah, thank you. Always fun, these Empire Showcase Day. I can never keep track of what names they choose to use, but I find them to be really
We're celebrating
fun,
the New York
fun
Brits,
days.
and that's all anyone needs
Yes.
to
I remember making a big score, and I think the second Showcase Day in '95 when Howie Tesher won the second race for the first, and they paid around $50 that he told me he
Nice.
liked. I think Donk won the first race at a big price, and the doll paid like $500 or something. Those are the good old days. The good old days when Howie Tesher was still around. You missed a good one not getting to know Howie. He was, as many of
I
our
was
people.
like a month old at that time.
He was, well, he passed away relatively recently, but yeah, no, he was, Howie was one of the people that makes me glad I found horse racing, to have friends like Howie Tesher, and there's quite a few others as well. Head over to Naira Bets. If you're not a member, use the promo code CUP25. We'll match with $200 your initial deposit, and we will give you next week a free $25 bet. So close. We have track stats. Check them out as well. Also, 20% bonus opt-in for this. Head over to Naira Bets for that. Opt-in over that bonus and superfectas. And finally, last but not least, FS1, 12:30 to 5:30, covering all the action at Empire Showcase Day. So we hope you're not joining us. Then you'll catch us at home. Anyhow, Sarah, thank you again. I'll be out next week. I'll see you guys in a couple of weeks. Sarah will be filling in ably, to say the least.
Hopefully.
Chris Griffin, he's got the changes coming up in just a few moments. Have a great day.
For almost 150 years, the Saratoga name has been synonymous with the finest quality, sustainably sourced spring water available anywhere. Saratoga carries on the rich tradition of its forefathers by crafting each stunning blue glass bottle with the same attention to detail and care that has been its hallmark for generations. Visit SaratogaSpringwater.com today or ask for us by name at your local market or restaurant. Saratoga Spring Water. Make every day exquisite.